While a federal judge in Hawaii has once again blocked President Trump's latest travel ban, which was set to take effect today. The latest ban, which Trump signed on September 24th, kept or updated restrictions on 5 of the 6 nations included in his original order: Iran, Libya, Somalia, Syria, and Yemen, while lifting restrictions on Sudan. It also blocked the issuance of all visas from North Korea, suspended all immigrant visas as well as all non-immigrant business and tourist visas from Chad, and blocked visas for government officials on business or tourist travel from Venezuela. In the ruling, the judge says the ban, which effectively denies entry to more than 150 million people, quote, suffers from the same maladies as the previous ban and improperly discriminates on the basis of nationality. Notably, the judge's ruling does not apply to the restrictions on Venezuela and North Korea. The White House immediately condemned what it calls a, quote, dangerously flawed ruling, saying it, quote, undercuts the president's efforts to keep the American people safe and enforce minimum security standards for entry into the United States. The Justice Department also says it will appeal the ruling. Joining us now, former acting U.S. Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates. She's giving the keynote address today at the National Law Enforcement Summit on Crime in 2017 in Washington, D.C. The summit is hosted by law enforcement leaders to reduce crime and incarceration. We will get into that in just a moment. Sally, good morning. It's good to see you. But first, I'd love to get your reaction to this latest ruling on the travel ban.
Well, good morning, and thanks for having me. Well, I think we're on travel ban 3.0 now, and I made my decision on the first travel ban, and in the early days when it even applied to lawful permanent residents and valid visa holders who literally were mid-flight for some of them when the travel ban was signed. And so I understand I haven't studied 3.0 to the same degree that I did the first travel ban, but understand that the judge there determined that, as you said, it suffered from some of the same maladies and in terms of what the actual intent was.
I think there have been, as you said, so many versions of this and so many rulings on it that some of the American people sort of lost track where it stands. Yeah. Do you believe at the end of the day the president's idea of a travel ban or some version of it will in fact be instated here in the U.S.?
Well, you know, it's hard for me to know. Again, I was focused on the first travel ban,
right,
that was incredibly broad. And I'm not sure there are a whole lot of folks out there that would credibly argue today that imposing a travel ban on people who have valid green cards without any kind of procedure would really pass constitutional muster. Now, I know there's been a lot more work on this. There's a lot more of a national security basis that's laid out and this travel ban, and there's actually been a process now that did not exist for the first travel ban, and actually consulting with national security agencies. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see when I assume travel ban 3 ultimately makes its way to the Supreme Court as well.
John Meacham?
General, curious, 9 months in, what grade you would give the resiliency of the rule of law in October of 2017 as opposed to, say, October 2016?
Well, first, I think I've mentioned to you before, John, I don't think I've earned being called general for 10 days as acting attorney general.
But it's going to be a great miniseries.
You know what? I don't know about that, General. I mean, John Meacham won a Pulitzer Prize, and he had a photographer under his bed taking pictures when he got the news. So, you know, quite grandiose.
Yes, ma'am. Sir.
Anyway, General, I'm sorry to interrupt, General. Go ahead, General.
No, there's going to be a lot of generals this morning. No, well, you know, I've written and talked about this a little bit. You know, I'm very concerned about the state of the rule of law. You know, our whole criminal justice system, and indeed a cornerstone of our form of government, is the rule of law, the concept that the laws apply equally to everyone, and no one is above the law, and likewise that the law is not used as a sword to go after your political enemies either. And historically, through both Democratic and Republican administrations, that's meant that there was a wall between the White House and the Justice Department when it comes to criminal investigations and prosecutions. You know, I understand that a lot of folks might say, well, the Justice Department is part of the executive branch, so what's wrong with the president telling DOJ who they should be prosecuting? Well, there's a whole lot wrong with that. And not only does it impact the rule of law, but it impacts the public's confidence and whether or not our criminal justice system is being used as a political tool. And we've seen that, unfortunately, over and over again with this president.
But Sally, following up on John Meacham's question, haven't there been at critical times when I'm sure you, myself, and others have worried about the rule of law, have worried about the checks and balances, haven't there been times where we have been pleasantly surprised that federal judges have stepped up, Republican federal appointed judges have stepped up and stopped the pernicious act, or even Jeff Sessions recusing himself, and Rod Rosenstein at a critical moment in these first 9 months, actually stepping forward and saying, I'm going to appoint Robert Mueller. Obviously, there are things that concern all of us about autocrats in training, but at the same time, there are some bright spots, aren't there, about our system actually holding, let's just say, constitutionally holding serve?
Absolutely. I actually think that there are a lot of bright spots, and you certainly identified some of them there. Our institutions are holding, and there are career men and women at the Department of Justice. In fact, the vast majority of folks at DOJ are career prosecutors and career lawyers. And they're holding in this. And so the issue is not whether the rule of law has actually been subverted, but whether the president has attempted to do that. You know, it's not for lack of trying on his part. And you know, that's important from a public confidence standpoint as well. If they see the president attempting to use DOJ as a tool, that really undermines the public's confidence in the criminal justice system, whether he is ultimately successful in that or not.
Sally, it's Katty Kay here. You've been watching, of course, the Russia investigation. When you look at who's been interviewed so far, what documents have been looked at, who's been hired by the special prosecutor, how do you rate the chances of Bob Mueller bringing criminal charges against anybody?
You know, I don't think I'm going to be laying odds on that. I have tremendous confidence in Bob Mueller. He is the consummate professional, and if anybody can get to the bottom of this, he can. And I think I'm just going to stay out of the way so he can do his job.
Sally, let me ask you about the reason you're there in Washington to talk about criminal justice reform. As you know, we've had an exploding prison population over the last 30 years or so, thanks in large part to the war on drugs and mandatory sentencing. Violent crime is at near historic lows. How do we square those two things? How do we get some of those people who have maybe committed minor drug offenses to not spend large portions of their life inside a United States prison?
Well, you're absolutely right, Willie. You know, we have 5% of the world's population, but yet 25% of its prisoners. And we've seen our overall prison population go from about 500,000 back in the early 80s to 2.2 million today. And that comes with really significant cost, because every dollar that we're spending incarcerating someone, and particularly, for example, a lower level nonviolent drug offender, for longer than they need to be there for public safety purposes, is a dollar that we don't have to address the emerging crime threats across the country. It's a dollar that we don't have to help our state and local partners, and a dollar that we don't have, importantly, for crime prevention and recidivism reduction programs. And so back in the Obama administration, we really were pushing very hard for sentencing reform. And you know, it's one of the few issues in Washington on which there is truly bipartisan support. This is not just a lefty Democratic thing. Now, you have everybody from the Koch brothers to the ACLU who recognize that we really need to adjust our approach to how we're using incarceration in this country. And that's what these over 200 law enforcement leaders from across the country, and when I say law enforcement leaders, I'm talking about police chiefs and sheriffs and prosecutors, Democrats and Republicans, all of whom are united in our conclusion that if we truly care about the safety of our communities, we have to adjust our approach to incarceration.
Now, you're exactly right. Lefties, left-wing extremists like Mark Holden and David and Charles Koch, behind this as strongly as anything, as well as many people on the left. It's fantastic. When are you going to run for something?
I have to tell you, you know, I've never been drawn to the idea of elective office. So
this isn't about what you want. This is about what America needs. Just remember that.
Well, you know, I hope that someday maybe I'll have another opportunity for public service. Elective office, I'm having a hard time seeing, but we'll see, I suppose.
All right, fantastic. Sally Yates, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank
Greatly
you.
appreciate it.
Thanks, Ray.
Coming up, bipartisan leaders in the Senate say they've got a deal on health care. The White House says not so fast. We're going to be talking to the chairman of the Republican Study Committee when Morning Joe returns. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.